I want to put an anchor down here and say something though, like, because I feel like everyone in this room has such a respect for you, Skinny, and I feel like students of the game right here in the UK, like, they understand your legacy and what you've done early to kick off the door for many to come in afterwards, and just have a body of work which is just a great body of work. And maybe you don't have a lot of bodies of work, but that body of work, and maybe the circumstances in why you never got to release much after that, but you've got that body of work. Do you know what I'm saying? So maybe, Matt, I want to talk to you about why we just feel like Skinnyman isn't maybe celebrated more in the legend and the imprint that you put down in this music game.
I think from my perspective, obviously I've come through from being a DJ, radio, record label, etc., etc., etc. I think the reality is Skinny was born before his time. You know, when you started coming around, let's think about this now. We're talking about the 90s. Yeah, that's when you start popping off. That's like 30 years ago. 30 years ago, you're out there grinding out, making music, doing it on your own thing. Nowadays, if you was that guy, you'd be someone like a Stormzy.
Yeah.
Because you're out there doing your own thing, you're making music that resonates with the kids of today. Yeah. But the audience has grown up so much more. In 30 years, look how far we've come. Yeah, it has to start somewhere. Unfortunately, invariably, the pioneers never get the full shine. Credit. And it's going on in America right now. Look at what's going on with LO and all the stuff that was going on with academics, where they're talking about the old school and they're being this, that, and the other, blah, 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 blah. And so what LO has done is he's set up his like company, the Rock the Bells tour and all that stuff. And what he's done is he's made the pioneers shareholders so they get a little something back. What would be great right now, and I'm not saying they have to do it, but it will be great right now if some of the kids that are like popping off right now paid it back to someone like a Skinny and recognized what he did in terms of opening up the doors 30 years ago. Because it's great that Stormzy's got a video out there, Mel made me do it, and he's recognizing people like Jazzy B, etc., etc. But before the Jazzies, people like Skinny were doing the thing on a hip-hop tip, because Jazzy was a soul guy, a reggae guy, sound systems, etc., etc. But there was real artists that were doing their thing, whether it's someone like a Skinny or a Kalashnikov. Yeah, there was so many, so many guys.
It's difficult for like you to include everyone in the Mel Made Me Do It, like what Stormzy done. But I want to say, like, for the record, like, Skinny, that album meant a lot to a lot of people, and obviously your debut album came out in 2004, but you was popping before that. I also think the problem in the UK as well is that aside from maybe there not being as much students that care what came before, I don't think there's much historians as well. So maybe that's part of the problem
that would
too.
Tell the story in a way that someone can say, well, that story is also my truth. I've seen many UK hip-hop documentaries. I've seen many hip-hop documentaries. I'm like, well, that weren't the hip-hop that I was at. So it's how the history is told and how it's portrayed. For me, I've seen a documentary by Chuck D called The Founding Fathers, talking about DJ Hollywood and DJ Grandmaster Flowers before the hip-hop movement ever would have evolved or been birthed. And then we have to look at our own truth. So I'm definitely one who heralds and gives respects to the people who paved the way for me as pioneers. And people often get misconceived about perception, because perception for me is what influenced me to become me, and the journey that I took, and the pioneers and the forefathers that I give credit to for the journey that led me to become who I am.
Who are yours?
So this is why I say, I mean, I really consider how my mother raised me in a very heavily influenced Rastafarian environment. The sounds of the talking drum, the power of the talking drum, the manifestation of word, power and sound, and how it can be used, and then where the history of that would have led to back to the talking drum of Africa. So when I look at categorizations of music, is it urban, is it indie, is it this, is it that, I actually give credit to all the pioneers of music. So all music and all musical instrumentation, first and foremost, came from Africa. So we don't know music if we don't know Africa. And that's the root of where it all came from. If we look at the era of the transatlantic slave trade, where Africans was taken away from their home shores and placed around the world, and we look at islands like Trinidad We look at places like Brazil. We look at places like Jamaica. So we have calypso music, we have reggae music, we have all sorts of music like that. And I look at when people started chanting and toasting on the mic and make great
soundboy culture.
Yeah, soundboy culture, but I make great historical comparisons. So whilst I was growing up, I would see Papa San talking in fast tongue, and I would also see Chaz and Dave talking in fast tongue, and I was like, that's Cockney rhyming slang around the piano. Papa San's doing reggae dancehall, chanting and toasting on the mic, like same like Professor Nuts and the people before him. So when I see what was going on in New York towards the latter part of the 70s, was that there was a postcode beef like they had never known before, and then there was a peace treaty amongst the gangs, meaning that people could now go to different areas and play music. Out of that, there was a guy who was from West Indian parentage called DJ Kool Herc, and what he had wanted to emulate was what was going on back in Jamaica within the sound system culture. Now, the sound system culture in Jamaica was birthed at the back of World War II. Because at the back of World War II, all they had was these little boxes that they used to hit and play, and now they had recording equipment that had been left by the BBC from when they set up JBC Radio. So now Jamaica was able to thrive musically and start this sound system culture, and from that, people would want to be able to keep the crowd entertained between records or within the dub section of the record. So you would be called the master of the ceremony. Now, being a master of a ceremony, you could have been DJ Hollywood in the early 70s, and you still have to keep the crowd entertained with your banter, and that's being a master of the ceremony. I think that Jamaicans can take the credit for taking being a master of the ceremony to the next level into chanting and toasting. So I credit people like Iroy and Uroy for being the first lyrical MCs over the dub section of the reggae music. What was trying to be emulated in America at the time was exactly what was going on in the dance hall, and the Americans didn't really understand the culture of the Jamaican MC, but they were still trying to emulate it. I know people was telling me before that, it was like, yo, if you own this Lincoln outside, come and move in it. If Jennifer's in here wearing her mum's fur coat, your mum's outside waiting to get a lick in the head, you better come out. And then it got into rhyming and little patterns and melodies, and the evolution of toasting and chatting was what became the evolution of the MC in America, trying to emulate that. I think within my upbringing of being into punk, rock and roll, reggae, ska, all sorts of music, stuff that the Who were doing, mod music and stuff like that, I saw a culture being birthed in front of my very eyes, because I saw the influences of people who were into the punk movement, such as Malcolm McLaren, Debbie Harry, Sex Pistols, getting a light shone on them from New York. So they was going to New York, and they was very interested in the subgenre cultures that were being birthed in New York. Now, my opinion doesn't always sit with everyone, and I'm not here to please people. I'm a child of the generation where there was a novelty in sophisticated begging. So at the time of Halloween, we would do Penny for the Guy. At the time of the Christian pagan festivities, we would go carol singing at people's door. Now, hip-hop was another way of us to sophisticated beg by dancing and street performing and holding out a hat, getting some money to feed our bellies, because we're children from a lower working class environment where it's hard to eat. So if you can street perform and get to eat from that, then it's something we're going to encourage every child in every lower working class community to get your skills of your dancing together, because you can get fed from it. But then this brings me back to what we would know to be called the shucking and jiving. So hip hop was a sophisticated way of begging through shucking and jiving and pulling out your hat and getting money
straight up,
because that was the reality of the way that you was getting to eat. So I've always seen this movement for what it was, birthed out of the postcodes that was happening in New York, and from that, the emulation of the MC has garnered and reached more credibility, because the credibility used to go to the DJ. And I think up until the time of when we can even think about Eric B and Rakim, Rakim was the MC, but it was Eric B and Rakim, where you almost seemed that the DJ had the front name Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince.
I think we need to go back to those days personally.
The DJ used to be at the forefront.
So being a little youth, being surrounded and submerged in all of these cultures, and London being a boiling pot of all of these multicultures taking place at the same time, I would go to a blues dance where the Jazzy B would be playing, and it would be a blues. And big up Jazzy B and the whole Romeo family, because not only musically, that they're a standing up family who really look after the whole community in North London and Islington, whether it's through the youth clubs, whether it's through music, whether you know, many different ways. So Jazzy B and the Romeo family are to be heralded in many ways, much more than just for their music alone. But whilst growing up, going to places like the African Centre or going to a blues dance, sneaking in the toilets, because I was about 10, 11 and I looked like I was about 6. So always having to sneak in through like the girls' toilet windows or something, and then the bouncers would see me as I'm walking out the dance. And I saw the musical melting pot of how it all evolved coming to Covent Garden for the first time. And what I would like to point out is that by no means in any way was the UK ever behind what was happening in New York, because as it was happening in New York, it was brought back to London the following week, whether it was by Malcolm McLaren or the people who were having that London, New York, I'll call it nylon. That nylon,
basically a connection.
That nylon collection, and so basically,
and we were getting all the tapes as well from all the radio shows.
Credit Morgan,
some people
Khan.
like WizKid, all those guys. We were getting all their tapes sent over from friends or family.
Yeah, Credit Morgan Khan, because like we were saying, we was getting tapes from people you hadn't heard, the Funky 4+1 and all of these kind of rappers. So I will say that by the time I was going to Covent Garden, at no way was we copying or late or behind. The beautiful thing about London, I can actually say at the given time,
Covent Garden, where a lot of busking used to happen.
So yeah, there used to be a lot of dancers down there, people like London All Stars, and then you had DJs that used to knock about around there like Cosmic Jam, people like that. These guys were like the forefathers, Pogo,
On the street.
Cutmaster Swift, all
Of
those
the
guys
UK
were down
scene.
there. They were like the forefathers of that whole period. People like Syndicate Fingers, all those guys were like the forefront of the early birth
this
of
is
hip
where
hop,
I
playing
give
break
true
beats and
recognition.
MCs.
Yeah, true recognition to the pioneers who did it here. And I can't consider myself in that kind of light when I know that there's so many people before me who I look up to in that light.
I hear you.
So when I think about Lazy Lady, when I think about the She Rockers, when I think about
Cookie.
the Cookie Crew, when I think about the Demon Boys, Force MDs, I think about there's so many to mention. I think about Shut Up and Dance, who groundbreaking label with great artists, great music, great rapping, that went on to influence the genre of the change in musical genres within the UK, from
Drum and bass and stuff, right?
hip hop to hardcore to acid to hardcore house to junglist, and a whole genres that was birthed from their influential sound of their movement. So there were so many people before me who I have to credit, Derek B, that I can say that did it and pioneered it before I ever got to even embrace it.
See, that's a testament
That
to
were
your character,
influential to
Skinny,
me.
because like we're talking about you and you're giving homage to like bare stuff before you, and a lot of this stuff is undocumented, and again we have a lack of historians, but you've just given a lot of people a lot of gems and a lot of research, a lot of anchor points, and I love that, because I feel like that conversation right there,
Now I'm going to
there's
show
a
you
lot
how
of Googling.
old, I'm going to show you how old I am. If you go back in time, there's a Derek B documentary somewhere where Derek's in the studio. If you look very carefully,
With Lyndon C.
yeah, with Lyndon, yeah. If you look very carefully, you'll
Big
see
up to Lyndon
you'll
C.
see a very young Matt White sitting on the sofa,
Hey,
because I used to supply Derek with beats.
see what I'm saying though?
And Lyndon C used to take me to that very said studio to see me the progress that was happening.
Yeah,
to
we
help me,
used to work out at Camden Roundhouse.
to help me with my creative writing process, because I think I would have been just turning 10, and he had great faith and belief in my musical abilities, and I thank him for that.
All right, let's just like, because I don't like to skip over these things, and Blacksmith, we've got things to talk about as
So
well. You know?
this is a history lesson for me, man.
Lyndon
I'm loving
C,
it.
like let's just have like, if we can, a couple of sentences about this person, just in case people don't know and need to be enlightened.
I would say he's been monumental as weaving the fabrics together of the collective London urban music scene, is what I'd say for Lyndon C.
70s, 80s?
80s, 90s.
So Lyndon started off as a DJ, and him and Derek used to DJ together at a place in Canning Town, and they were good friends. And then when Derek became an artist, Lyndon was his tour DJ, and then when I left Soul to Soul, Derek embraced me as part of that setup. And when Lyndon and him had little disagreements, Derek was like, okay, you're going to come and DJ for me. And then I found myself supplying beats and this, that, and the other. And, you know, we were working with Cookie Crew and people like that. So, yeah, you know, Lyndon was definitely one of those guys that was in and around, like, the beginnings of hip-hop. But there's a lot of people that were doing different things in different ways. Simon Harris had his label.
Morgan Khan.
Music of Life. That was... had so many different artists on it.
Electro Essential was game-changing for the UK, for us to get the Electro Essential compilation albums of what was current in New York at the time. Then I'll go on to say this within the journey of music. I always like to MC, also toast and chant on ragga, rap, poetry.
Ragga, aka reggae dancehall, just in case you don't know.
And just be lyrical, basically. I remember the first time it ever hit me about identification was when I was listening to LL Cool J say, "So forget Oreos, eat Cool J cookies, I'm bad." And I was like, what Oreos? So I didn't know. And someone went to me, they're biscuits. Like, we don't even call them cookies, we call them biscuits. So I was like, so it would have meant more to me if it had said, so forget Jaffa Cake biscuits,
eat bourbons.
you know, like I would have got it. It would have, and I was like, yeah. So let's look at what we know. We ride on double-decker red buses. We eat biscuits, not cookies. Let's identify with ourselves more. And I think with the time of identifying ourselves as the UK, from the UK, with the many influences that we have from the West Indies, from worldly influences that we have, blessed here in the UK with the multicultural scene that we have, and I think what happened within the music is that and I've said this before and I'll say it again and add in and tell me, you know, your version of how you remember this, that UK soul was really finding its footing with the likes of Soul to Soul, Loose Ends, Misha Paris, etc., and UK soul was really finding its independent footing. UK reggae with the likes of Smiley Culture, Tipper Irie, Saxon Sound System,
and some rare groove thrown in there as well.
Donny, you know, people like Donny and all of that, representing all of that.
Omar.
So Omar, Lifeuk, and the whole beautiful scene that we were seeing from the soul movement, from the UK reggae movement, finding its own identity. Because, I mean, Lovers Rock is a UK thing, you know, like, so UK reggae for Lovers Rock was really finding its footing in its own UK identity. UK soul was really finding its own identity. UK rap was really finding its own identity. And so for the genres of black music thriving in the UK that was just finding their own footing and their own sense of identity, we was all suffocated instantaneously by something called acid house that took the nation like a phenomenal, because not only did it
late 80s, early 90s,
mid 80s for me.
So no, acid house
For me, 1986, 1987.
It was very late 80s, early 90s, because I remember back then when I was part of that Soul to Soul movement, we were doing warehouse parties, playing 70s funk music and 80s soul and the late 80s hip hop, the Public Enemies of this world, etc., etc. And I remember one particular party, I'll never forget it. It was in a warehouse in Alperton, in Wembley,
West London.
Yeah, and it was Soul to Soul, and it was Norman J, and I think, if memory serves right, it might have been Young Disciples, Femi Fem, and Brother Marco, who was part of that setup.
Oh,
and we were playing in this one room, and it was quite a small room, 100 odd people maybe. But in the main room, which felt like an emptied out sort of storage container area type thing, they had smoke beyond belief. They had like flashing strobe lights, and they were playing this music that was acid house. and that was my first ever, like, what the hell is this? And people with their eyes wide open, high as kites. I didn't know what they were taking, but it weren't smoke. It weren't the usual stuff. You know, I was looking at these guys, like, what is this? And people would tell me, oh, they're popping pills, they're doing E's. I was like, what the hell's E's? And that was my first memory of acid house.
Being a kid from the street and having no limitations on my freedom, I was able to entertain anything I wanted to do. So
Did you say you indulged a bit?
Oh, absolutely, because what I was free, living out my inhibitions. So I'd be in a blues dance one night, I'd be in a hip hop concert the other night, I'd be in a soul concert the next night, anywhere where we could get to sneak in and kind of party, really. And so we used to go to this place called the Boston Arms in Tufnell Park, and I remember being...
I used to play in there.
So I remember it being 1986, and I was 11 years old.
Jeez.
And we was in there and we was like, what kind of music is this? And we had kind of been digging in the crates up until then and delving for sound and stuff. So it's kind of what we knew to be like Chicago, Detroit, Illinois house. We already kind of knew this sound.
There's people like Marshall Jefferson, the Poke, and all that, Adonis, and all that kind of stuff.
So we already understood this is a Chicago, Illinois, Detroit sound of probably what used to be disco that got more contemporary and became house.
Well, it was digitized. They just turned it very electronic. Back then, the acid house wasn't really about singing vocals. It was more about the musicians tweaking the phonics.
Yes.
Exactly.
So,
but you mentioned Boston's Arms. That actually is my school. Was right next door. Acklenburley. That was my school.
Space. The night was called Space.
Yeah.
And so I was 11. And we was in Space, and someone were like, we kind of know this music's like Chicago, House, Illinois, Detroit. We kind of know about this kind of vibe. And then we've been asked if we've ever had what's called a Disco Biscuit.
Wow, a disco
biscuit. And it was, for me, it was like, no, never had a disco biscuit. So this guy gave us this speckled looking thing that was about the size of 2 pence piece with perforations split into 4 quarters or 2 halves or whatever. And me and my friend, I'm not going to say his name and put him out there, but me and my friend did this half of this disco biscuit each. And before we knew, it was like, if you want to ride, ride a white horse. And if you want to be rich.
How old were you back then?
11. Yeah. It was 1986. I was 11. I was on a disco biscuit, and I was saying to the DJ, I'm a rapper, you know, give me the mic.
Yo.
I was like, and I probably could rap a million miles an hour.
Was you old enough to be in the venue?
No.
Absolutely not. He must have gone down the. You must have gone down the back stairs.
We used to get him through the pub.
There's only 2 ways in.
Right. Remember, there's the pub.
Yeah, you got the side entrance where the bouncers normally sat, and then you got the back entrance, which is like the fire doors.
Yeah, the fire door.
But think of this though, like, I don't know if we're actually contextualizing this, but somebody gave an 11-year-old a disco biscuit, which was basically an ungoverned substance, which was drugs.
It was E.
I think
an 11-year-old.
It was the early beginnings of E, when it was
E's
probably at its most.
Yeah, all of that.
It was ecstasy. It was at its most
underground.
It was at its most potent, like, purest form, because they weren't cutting it with other stuff back then.
But what I don't know, man. I'm not trying to push no one out there, but what kind of person would give you this, man?
Do you know, within that environment, I can say that everyone was kind of promoting free love and thought that was their way to free love, because it really did make them feel euphoric. So I think that they wanted everyone to share this feeling of euphoria. So much so that within
even the children.
That's why it was called ecstasy.
Everyone.
That's why they brought the licensing acts in.
Yeah, they brought a bill to be able to tear gas and separate anyone, and even if 4 people were together, they could send them in 4 separate ways. This is when people started to use illegal warehouse nightclubs, and from the illegal warehouse nightclubs, they started raiding them, tear gassing them, as they did to the people meeting on the fields. So then it had to kind of become legal nightclubs, places like the Ilford Island Arena, and places like Camden Palace and places like Hippodrome started doing Orange and Fantasia and Utopia and all these
Limelight.
Yeah, and all of these different raves where you'd go there and you'd probably consume whatever you wanted to before
places
you queued
like Dungeons. I remember
well, the
going
Four
to
Races was the transition that went from being West Indian blues dance to people out of there not wanting to come down, going, can we come and party in here? To the people who own that going, you know what, where it's more beneficial financially for us to cater to this demographic than anything we've ever catered to before. So it went from being a blues dance to a after party for ravers. Yeah, and so my point that I'd like to get onto from there is the influence of reggae music, influence of Jamaican population within London since the Windrush has been so strong that it didn't take long for what became acid house music to get speeded up a little more with that hip hop breakbeat, and then before you knew it, the reggae bass line was playing at its right speed, where the double time hip hop break would be sped up double time, so it'd fit right in with the beat. So you'd have a reggae dub bass line with a double time hip hop drum beat.
Sounds like jungle to me.
And they was calling it hardcore junglist. So hardcore junglist, and I think people like Flinty Badman and Demon Rocker,
Of course, Ragga Twins.
who were on the dancehall circuit, probably would have been invited to one of these parties and spat on the mic and went, listen, we're having more fun here and we're getting paid more, and people are appreciating us more for doing dancehall over this new movement that's called reggae junglist, hardcore junglist, and it went from being hardcore junglist just to junglist. I think that when I look at the genres to present day, and I've kept all of my observations under a scrutinized microscope, that I saw a whole lot of oh no, the raggers are coming, fucking raggers are coming, and all of this, and they didn't really seem. There's always been a prejudice to young black boys coming to the party. There still is to this present day, and for as long as I can remember, there's been a prejudice for young black boys attending to the party, for whatever insecurities people may have to not want these young black boys to attend the party, but they exist. And and if you give the young black boys the mic, they're gonna rap. And they're going to do good, and they're going to vibes, and they're going to make the place bubble. And there were some people who, for their own reasons, are insecure about this and wanted to keep moving the genres. So when it became junglist, it was very influential with people rapping over the music now. And this is when you could hear the difference in where the demographic of people were coming from, because there was people in Essex that sounded like they were gypsy fair riders hosting the waltzers. Riders, hold tight, let's go. Who's staying on? Pay for one more ride and you can spin away. And they sounded like, where are you lot from? The fair ride. You know, like if you listen to Rinse FM. And then you got like the other people that are coming from a reggae sound system that are chatting on the mic. For me, wanting to be a lyricist, I saw, I want to get involved in this, just like how General Livy and UK Apache are smashing it up, chatting dancehall on this new junglist movement. But then there was the fear of becoming established as a jungle MC, when I wished to be established as a hip-hop lyricist, to then go on and do anything that I want. But first and foremost, so there was a danger, and I found myself, whilst seeing the rise of MC Shabba D and Skibba D and Det and Moose 5-0 Navigator and that kind of, I thought, Stevie Hyper D, I thought, let me courteously step back from being an MC on the jungle circuit, because I'll be considered a jungle MC, where I want a typecast, where I want my niche of my typecast first and foremost to be a hip-hop rapper from the UK. So as I've took a step back, what I've seen within the music industry, while still enjoying what I do, and most people would go after parties to a come down, listen to trance music and stuff like that. I'd want to listen to rare groove or hip hop or stuff like that on the come down. So it let me know that people are taping over their golden Bass Odyssey versus Kilimanjaro sound tapes with Rinse FM or Weekend or Raw Mission.
Before it was digital.
And I was like, why are you taping over these golden tapes of Bass Odyssey versus Kilimanjaro to tape Rinse, Weekend Rinse, like, and all of it? I couldn't get my head around it. And so what I saw was, as the music was evolving, people who didn't really want the raggers, the black boys coming, they went, oh, let's be trendy and start these money penny house promotions where we can go with our Machino shirts and not feel like insecure about the black boys turning up. And I think around that time was probably when a group of youths from East London wanted to be raving and partying where the girls were to the music that was current for the time. And where they found that many doors were shutting on their face, which black music in the UK would have always found that to be the case. These young frustrated youths did something groundbreaking and opened and created their own genre called grime. And because where they didn't want the black boys chatting ragga on the jungle. Then they didn't want the black boys coming into the house dance. The black boys said, you know what, we're going to do it anyway, but it's going to be called grime. And out of grime, I think that with the lyricism of rapping, it brought lyricism back alive. Because with jungle, you didn't have to be so lyrical. You just had to be vibes.
More about the vibe.
But I think that the
Crowd
grime
pleasing.
brought back the lyrical content. Now with the sound of the phonic sounds changing, we've now got introduced to the digital revolution of music, to the great sounds that have been accomplished through junglist music, the bass lines, the intricate drum patterns that Timbaland was responsible for stealing, you know, and all kind of things like and facts and all kind of things like this, that we can say, where it became grime and it became more lyrical. We've seen different musics in different genres now, where we've seen Skrillex and the dubstep genre of music with that phonic sound, where people like Rick Ross are rapping over Skrillex dubstep sound. But we've also seen where it's gone from 21 Seconds to Go to where it's gone to Wiley, to where it's gone to Heartless Crew, to where it's gone to now the young drill rappers. And the young drill rappers, for me, are still using the phonic sound of junglists on what I'll call a hip-hop tempo pattern. So I've seen the genres come full circle back into UK hip-hop creating itself as a brand new genre called drill that's been influential to the world. People like Pop Smoke in America copying and emulating the sound of what's been birthed in the UK.
And blowing up, but obviously with the help of UK producers as well.
Yes. So I'm saying that within my musical journey, lots of times I've seen that where young black boys have had the door closed on them, they've had to make a DIY movement to
Combat
to create their own.
They created new doors and just went through themselves.
Yeah. So as a old school artist who now looks at the present day genre of kids, going from yesteryear to the Soulja Boy movement, from the ringtone movement, you know, I've lived throughout all these genres, the ringtone era, Soulja Boy era, going viral like the Crazy Frog, Ring Ding and Gamlang Style and stuff like that. What do they call it when you go viral, right?
Yeah, go viral.
Trending or whatever. And so now I love the fact that a child can have something like Fruit Loops Nintendo in his front room and make himself a rhythm track, record it and put it out and become Soulja Boy. I remember someone saying to me, there's that guy who done that song, that cheerleader. A little kid made a song about a cheerleader, and the tune blew, and it went, you know, it was like #1 around the world, this cheerleader. I remember someone saying to me, if I hear this cheerleader one more time, and I was thought, how are you begrudging a little boy who probably fell in love with an American girlfriend who had to go back home that summer? Now the money's done, you know, and he probably lives in a zinc fence shanty town in Jamaica, and he's made a little tune about the girl that he met on the summer holidays who was a cheerleader, and now he's bossed to the world, and someone's gonna want to begrudge that. So the power in music and the availability to have the power in music today is a whole new genre. And speaking to artists of today, they really have everything that we never had. And like you say, I don't like to think that we should be credited, because they're doing everything that we never did, and they're making sure that they're doing it as a self movement. And today, when I think that people like Kanye West are introducing us how to use stem players, when people like Snoop Dogg are becoming the owners of Death Row Music and telling us about the market of NFTs, and when people can independently bring their music to the fans without any middleman, now we're in the most beautiful position that the industry has ever been for a musician to have. So for all of the youths who are grabbing this with both hands and utilizing it, and I see all of the rise of the recent genre of the UK, from the Freddos to the Heady Ones to the OFB to the Young T and Bugsy to the RD, Rdads to the H to the Bugsy Malone to the, and I'd like to credit you all. I mean, I want to say all their names because I do listen to you all, and I'm a big fan. And what's happened is beautiful now, that all of these kids that I would have wanted to see shine now have the access to get the ability to shine. And it's the most beautiful day in music that I've ever witnessed in my long life.
Lord of mercy.